Hello there, everybody. This is Tigitar here, and welcome back to another episode of the Tigaria construction process. Here we have part number 13. It's the second to last part of the current state of Tigaria, and I've gotten back to my regular microphone, so you've got that going again, so that's nice. In this part, we're going to be looking over quite a few different little sections, actually. We've got the food and consumable display. Let me just kind of go, actually, I just had it pulled up and then I closed it. Food and accessories. We have the monument, which I have mentioned on and off about having a monument for the mini game completion sort of display, I guess. So I get that in this episode. We have the NPC housing, which is a pretty big section, and finally the plant display. So all plants and a lot of stuff that includes. So that's kind of the trajectory for now. But starting off with, I've got to do a little more terraforming here and there. So now that we had, as of last episode, the baseline, kind of the mass, the ground mass laid out in the foundation of the structures that we built on the left, I figured I would do something similar on the right-hand side, right above the augmented biomes again, but I would just start with the baseline of dirt to provide that structure to build the rest of the displays on that side upon. And then before I got going too much, I did make some quick little notes there visually, in the form of those arrows and outlines, because I needed some way of a pathway connecting the central core up between the pyramid and the mountain and the rest of these lower underground winged sections, as well as the above ground displays above the augmented biomes. So I needed some sort of connecting pathway, so I had to take a little bit to jot that out on the map and get that sort of in place spatially. And then along the way, I was starting to work on the underground, which is where we're going to be doing the food display down here, all consumables and that, potions and whatnot. But I realized that the outline, the very outmost border of the base underground here, was not very distinct or prominent in the darkness here. So I went ahead and I added in these emerald gemspark blocks so that in darkness and later on in full screen captures using the camera tool, you would actually be able to see visually kind of that exterior barrier that contains the base within it. So I wanted to get a little bit of distinguished lighting to bring that barrier out, I guess, in pictures and stuff. So I went ahead and did that. Of course, I did want it optional, so I also went and wired up all of the new blocks on a switch so that it can be toggled on and off. And I actually hooked that to an existing switch that I already had in the center there. So little detour for this, and obviously with the amount of wire that I have already in place for other things, mainly the minecart track doors, had to make little bits of adjustments here and there for that, but overall not too much of an interruption. And then I could get back to the space on the left here. Well, actually, no. Maybe I do the right as well. So, actually, what I preliminarily did before the actual display sections down here in the underground is basically map out and get a rough idea of the pathway that I want to use for exploration. And then I would have the leftover remaining space around that to then build the displays in. So I kind of needed to do that first because I did need navigation of some kind, which would also have to somehow include the minecart tour. So I still hadn't figured out how exactly I was gonna manage that, but I did need to think about it. So I had this general pathway outlined on both the left and right sides, and then as a base to before I got going too much, I wanted to just fill the whole thing in with walls so that I would have that done when I went to actually build in front of it. As I think I mentioned an episode or two ago about how many walls I used, specifically ebonstone brick, here is where I use quite a bit more of them. So I spend a good amount of time just placing the walls down. I do take advantage of builder potions to get a little bit of a boost, which I again still think helps. But it's basically a lot of wall placement. Again, this part would be something that could be nicely accelerated if there was something like the drill containment unit, but in reverse, where you could place mass amounts of wall quickly. The smart cursor, I mean, does the job, but it takes a little bit of time. So, of course, it's definitely watchable in time-lapse mode, but in real time I was doing this for what seemed like a while. So, but after we get the walls all done, I think then I finally am able to start more fully mapping out the space that's available, and then I can figure out where to sort of start arranging plans for the future display sections left to go. So I had, as mentioned, the consumables, but other things that I ended up including downstairs in this underground area would be the vault, which displays kind of wealth, but also ores and bars, and that themed those themed items. And on the left hand side here, those two things, consumables and then the vault, took up almost the entire thing, if I remember correctly. Like, there's not much more, so that's the main thing that goes over here. And then on the right hand side, I had all of the accessories. That was an important section. Then I had all of the wiring tools and mechanisms in their own section, which we'll get to in the final episode in the next one. And then miscellaneous items, anything left over that I could possibly find that I hadn't already included in another display section, I wanted to get shown off, so I have a miscellaneous items section. And I'm trying to think, there's a handful of other smaller things here and there. One of which would be like the gem trees and gems. So I have those built in on the right hand side eventually. But at this point, I figured I could get going on the consumables. And so this was sort of the first display that I went and started to lay out here in this underground portion. And so there was a lot of trial and error in testing and finding different shapes and the general way in which I was gonna actually, get this display built. Because at this point, I didn't really know if I was just gonna have this large open area that I just put walls all over, and was I just going to put layers of platform shelves and just display the items right on there, or did I have enough room to actually build in a structure and rooms to isolate and organize the items in. So I tried to first come up with some sort of room structure and shape that would allow me the space to display the different items organized in a cool way. And with the consumables in mind, I already had an idea of how many and in what categories they would all kind of fit in. And so I was going off of that while trying to build myself enough area to fit all of it, and then make it into its own uniquely themed area or structure that would actually fit these items decently well. So I had the consumables in three main parts. There was kind of the smallest, the permanent consumables, most of which were crafted from tossing items into shimmer. But you'd have like the life crystals, the mana crystals, and then life fruit, and then whatever, a lot of those can be crafted into through the shimmer as well. So stuff like that. Then I have potions of all kinds as sort of another cohesive section. And then on top of that, there's the food. So there are many, many different foods, either crafted, cooked, or dropped from enemies. And so those were the three main sections that I was breaking things up into. And so my initial kind of imagination was to have the potions all together in sort of a wizardy laboratory or potion lab, like potion brewing room, a medieval potion brewing room. And that's this top section right highest up that's sort of loosely cone shaped. Then on the bottom right, smallest section was going to be the permanent consumable items. And then the main hall, that's this largest opening, was going to be for all the rest of the regular foods in there. So I knew how many of each of those there were. I had sort of the general space, and I started playing around with the spacing of item frames so that I would have the room to fit everything. I had an idea for the themes like I was kind of talking about. So in the food room, I was going to try to make it like a grand medieval banquet hall or dining hall and have all the food displayed there, which would thematically work pretty well if I could pull it off. And then I had, a little room here and there. So just on the left-hand side of it, there's that small room that I cosmetically added on for a small kitchen type idea. I did a little bit of reshaping of the smallest permanent consumable room and played around with sort of just a magical, mystical theme for that to fit the theme of permanent consumables, roughly. But another thing that I've already worked on a little bit that you probably saw was the minecart track. So I still had to be thinking about the continuous minecart track and how it would be able to navigate all of these sections underground. So it's going to be entering from the mushroom biome over there on the left. And it's going to come right through the potions section in the top. And my solution was just have another doorway, actuated door that opens up when you're on the minecart track. Only you'll go off a little jump, hop through the room, and then slide out the doorway and fall down the staircase. And luckily, when you're going downwards, you have that option of falling in a minecart, so you can just go straight down in a line and have no issues at all. So I was pretty happy with that, but I had no idea what I was going to do on the other side of the underground when I had to go up a staircase. Because building upwards on a straight line, or as close to it as possible, was going to be challenging. I knew that. So over here, as mentioned, most of the permanent or not most, but a lot of the permanent consumables are crafted via shimmer. So I thought it would be cool to include a little potion capsule or bottle of shimmer in the actual room there and build that in. And then just get everything laid out so that I had the space and the spacing correct for all of the actual displays and item frames and that. The food items, of course, are kind of special because they can go on plates, which potions and the permanent consumables cannot. So that was kind of another main distinguishing factor for that whole category of organization. So in addition to the item frame to show the food off itself, I wanted to show it in placed plate food form as well. So I had that next to as part of each of the food displays. And once I had that, I actually pretty much had all of my space, all of the item frames actually laid out and ready to go, so I could move on to the furnishing and the thematic furnishing of each of the small rooms. In general, they all do have the sort of medieval theme, but they were each different in their own little vibes and energies, I guess. So in the main banquet hall, banquet tables, and a couple of other types of tables. I went for some variety. So I also included the Snowwood. What the heck? Boreal. That's what it is. The Boreal wood table, I believe, just to mix it up. And then the classic gold chandeliers with gold candles. I find that those generally for castles and medieval interiors they just work really nice. They've been around forever and they still are. They're the old but gold light source, you could say. So those worked pretty good. And then in addition to the display items, I had different foods actually on the tables and stuff just to add to the aesthetic a little bit. And then eventually I did manage to get to the point where I could start the filling in of the display items. So I started with the few permanent items we saw over there. And I'm starting to wonder, I'm pretty sure I saw Okram's razor that I put in there, which makes sense, but I don't have... I mean, technically it's a... Oh, no, that's not what that is. That's the mechanical cart augment. That's right, okay. Yeah, so all the permanent ability increases, not boss summon consumable items. All of the boss summon consumables are already included in the boss display as part of that. And if not, then they would go in the miscellaneous items at the end, I think. I think I have everything, but again, there's probably stuff that I've missed here and there. So anyway, got all of the food and the consumables filled in, so that was my first section figured out here. Quickly, I needed to make sure that the minecart track was going to be suitable and functional. So I went ahead and just filled in a little bit on the infrastructure for navigation, the staircase. And then I added in the minecart track, which works nice as just the railing for the staircase. And that would dump you clear down into the second large spiral staircase that takes you clear down all the way to the very bottom, basically, where the underworld is built. And then I added just a short little nubbin of minecart rail there with the two booster tracks, which gets you perfectly up to speed for the next section of the rail system. Or so I thought. It was a long time after this when I discovered that and I think it was something in the underworld section was costing me just the slightest amount of momentum. I was like bumping my head slightly against some slope, and then it was causing me to crash in the underground ice biome. But that's a problem for another time, unless I do discover that sooner than I remember. But so after the staircase was in place on the left, I went over to the right and again started getting the framework and the infrastructure completed. So swapping out the initial bricks for the final gray painted mixed texture. And I think for all these bricks down here, I actually used the same brick block palette that I used for like the main core of the castle at spawn, which was of course painted white, but it just has ebonstone, crimstone, and pearlstone bricks. Whereas the underground portion, same block palette, but this time painted gray, so that it lowered the lighting brightness and everything for the underground part. So then I do go ahead and start attacking the minecart question. And so I basically had to go up the staircase somehow. And I messed around briefly with like short jumps up and back to zigzag up. But you lose a little bit of height every time you do that. So I had to come up with a little, just basically I ended up with the standard zigzag minecart track, and then my only option was basically to use this and then build the spiral staircase in accommodation with this track. Now I could still use echo coating to make the track or part of it invisible, which I did end up doing to make it look like the track actually spirals around in the same way that the staircase does. So every other, the diagonals going upwards to the left or inwards would be echo painted, and so it kind of gives that spiraling illusion, at least visually. So that worked out okay, but then of course I needed to figure out how to integrate the navigational platforms in with it, and I ended up just following the staircase or the minecart rail with platforms, and it worked okay, but it's not really perfect. But as far as the ugliness could have turned out, I felt pretty happy and was content with the outcome, I guess. It still kind of fits the spiral staircase theme, and visually looks like it works. So that was my minecart, one of my major minecart track dilemmas overcome. Here I go with the testing, and oh, maybe this is actually where I started to realize it wasn't working. Or actually, no, maybe I tested the whole bottom section, but before I got into the ice part, which is where the precision really matters, and so I didn't yet notice that I had screwed it up somehow in the underworld. Anyway, add a little bit more infrastructure at the very bottom, outside of the underworld. Maybe find a few adjustments that I need to make with the statue in the middle. I don't remember what I was exactly looking at here. And after some brief contemplation, I moved on to the accessories. And so I first figured out what I wanted to use for the actual display of each accessory, which I ended up copying the little framework that I had used in the two wing portions that I have hanging from the core of Tigaria between the support monoliths, which I use for documenting the progression and the building progress of Tigaria. So each of those signs is surrounded with a little frame with chlorophyte bricks and diamond gemspark. So I went with the same idea down here. That way everything was fully lit. I didn't have to worry about lighting, and it's also toggleable lighting, so I could, of course, hook it all up to a light switch and have the displays themselves on a light switch, which was an advantage. So then I had, again, by this time I had all of the accessories that I wanted to display, and I had taken the time to organize them into different sections, so I knew how many I needed per section, and I just went along outlining and building in the correct number of accessories per section, and then separating those into their own distinguished zones. So and I don't exactly remember which section is what, but it'll become pretty apparent later on. I put all of like the boot accessories together, all of the wings, and then the combat oriented ones, the informational and or like that category all went together, I think. So I tried to do it generally logically, and then of course ended up with different amounts of accessories in each category or in each section. And you'll notice I am laying this out much differently from the consumables portion on the left that we started with. Over there, I mentioned how I built in structures in actual rooms for the items rather than just having them all out in a big platform or grid, whereas on this side I went with the other option of not having a full structure for each section, but instead just placing them all in the available area, larger area, because I knew that it would take up a lot more space. And if I had actually tried to build like each of these sections their own room or larger themed enclosure, I would run out of space. I did not have the room to do that, at least with this chosen display for each accessory. It is a 4x4 display with one block in between each of the items, so it is not as compact nearly as like the food items were, but I felt like I wanted to give the accessories a little bit more space and highlight each one a little more than the food items, which can all kind of be lined up and closely put together. So I did kind of design a larger amount of space in each display intentionally. Looking back on it, I could have gone about that differently, but this is kind of how I thought the best way to show off the items was actually going to be for the accessories specifically. Then after I had all of the frames outlined, I went ahead back through with the actuators, so I needed to get them all inset in the background, actuated them, and it was right around now I started realizing that they kind of become invisible upon actuation. They blend in very well with the background of just solid ebonstone brick walls, And I had a little bit of a dilemma figuring out whether or not that would still be adequate for what I wanted to do. In the center of the frame where the item frame would actually go over, I did have the starry wall. I don't remember if it was blue or gold. Starry wall to back the item itself in its echo-coded item frame. So I still felt like I could reach an adequate contrast for the item itself, but I was still a little bit thrown off by how these displays actually ended up turning out. Because up in the upper wing portions, they hang on in front of just a straight glass background, which they all stand out nicely in front of. But when it's all gray brick, when everything is just gray brick, it all blends together much more. So in the end, I ended up still kind of going with it, but it definitely didn't have the same contrast and highlight pop that I was kind of initially hoping it would, I guess. So had this little corner area down here right at the bottom of the staircase, and so another thing I needed to remember was room for the teleporter access for quicker transportation to each of the sections. And so here was a little cubby spot that I had enough space. I could go ahead and build in my teleporter for the accessories access. So I was able to sort of put that together here, make a cool little teleporter station. And then back on the left side with the consumables, I did the same thing, only in a smaller room that fit right in there. So I was able to get both of the teleporters for these sections in place, and I'm trying to think. I must have another teleporter down in the underworld, of course, but I don't remember if I have one in the lower part of the underground before the underworld or not. I might not, but before I went to fill in all the accessories, I grabbed some general furniture, some signs, so that I could label each of the sections, and then just added that baseline of color and detail to each of these larger platforms so that there would be something supporting visually the each of the sections, rather than just a blank line barrier of the brick floor. Some marble furniture, but also quite a lot of variety I started using just to mix things up. Like I had the Tinkerer's workbench in here, and that actually works well because many of the accessories, of course, can be combined using it. So thematically, the Tinkerer's workstation or workbench was a nice thing to include here. And then, of course, the rubble maker. I go crazy with that every time to get all the little details and small rocks and stuff put down. And then finally, after that, I was able to gather up the actual accessories and place them down in their organized array. So now you can kind of get a good idea of what the different sections are, how they're organized. We've got basically like combat, mobility, specifically into the wings and boot sections for their own thing, and then informational and building and stuff like that. So there's quite a few different things. Oh yeah, I forgot about all the different colors of yo-yo, string, and golf balls are technically accessories. So those had their own little spot. The golf balls are redundant with the golf display, but I was okay with that. I think I doubled them up instead of just leaving the golf balls out. Since I did have space down there, I decided to go for it. So once I finished up with those accessories, next thing I jumped onto was the monument. So this is the minigame monument, and all I wanted to do was build a display or a monument structure with item frames basically ready to be filled in with the various little victory tokens that the player is rewarded from completing various mini games and parts of the mini games. So my idea generally was just to have sort of an outdoors what am I, like a, not like a gazebo or a lattice, but like I don't know, a large outdoor platform structure. I can't think of any way to describe it very well, but basically kind of what I'm coming up with. And then the whole bottom maybe an important quality would be the tiers, so I could in the future continue to build tiers and layers so that each one would be would serve one of the various mini games. So to start off with, there's 3. So basically I had this little pyramid tier staircase levels at the very bottom, where the bottom levels, as they got smaller, would just be context and grandeur and furniture and support the theme. And then at the top, where we have those equally sized platforms, I could then use those to build and theme based on each of the mini games themselves. So, as mentioned, 3 mini games currently. I needed 3 tiers for one for each of those that I could then theme to match. But in the future, if I were ever to add more mini games, I could do so, and I could also just expand the monument upward with another tier for each of the games. So I had that general thought to allow for expansion in the future, and then things would kind of have that option, I guess. Seemed like a good idea. The only really interesting thing about the monument, I guess, is you'll notice it's a even block in width. So there is a 2-block center instead of just 1. So that provides certain challenges, especially around like spiral staircases. So I do have a central spiral staircase in the top here that connects the upper sections of the ones assigned to the various mini games. And so I had a 2-block shaft instead of just 1, which, changes the dynamic a little bit there. And then I got going on the theme that I wanted for each of the mini games. Mostly, I just kind of picked a block that I used in the main interface for the mini game. So the top one there, and I believe I did it from bottom to top in order that I built the mini game in. So the first layer down there with the luminite brick walls is the trivia game, Are You Smarter Than the Guide? And the luminite I use in the main game interface like launch area, but I also use it in one or multiple of the victory chambers, I think, like the level completion zones. But then on the second tier there, we have the downfall representation, which has just tin, what's it called? Tin, not plating. I think that's what it's called. Tin plating, right? I think so. Which was one of the main things I used on the spaceship that serves as the game interface for Downfall. And then finally the last layer for Gridlock, the newest one, which I use adamantite walls to contrast with my slabs underground for that build, and so that ties back into that one. I wanted a greenery and sort of overgrown theme as well to encapsulate the living energy that Tigaria as a whole kind of has. And so once I had the main structure laid out and then I went and tried to add vines growing and twisting throughout the whole structure to add that context and that support and that atmosphere. So I got that going. A lot of hammering involved and little detail work for sure. I, of course, plan to actuate most, if not all, I think actually all of these, so that it would just be background only. No effects that make it look like it's more in the foreground or growing in front of any of the platforms. And then once I had the actuation all done, I could then fill in with walls, both living wood wall and also flower and living leaf walls to provide that fullness to the structures and the leaves themselves. Make sure that all feels right. I probably could have done okay with just having used walls, like the living wood walls and then living leaf and flower walls, but it definitely adds a level of detail and texture if you take the time to do the actuated blocks first. There's just so much more detail that you can find hammering the blocks, changing the blending, and all of that. So definitely went with that first. And then I started on the furnishing, which my main goal was just to provide a sense of grandeur and accomplishment, being the monument. So I had a few mannequins that I planned on filling with special armor pieces, and then generally classy outdoors furniture, I guess. like a royal courtyard or something, like a sense of royalty to it, I guess, is what I was hoping for. So a lot of marble furniture, some statues, some of the potted plants, only a little bit more organized in symmetry than otherwise. Maybe a few critters here and there, and then some plants as well for color and flowers and that. Then for the armor, or for the mannequins, I grabbed a bunch of Arcalis furniture, vanity sets that I had. Luckily, I had quite a few of them, so I could fill, I believe, 4 different mannequins with the Arcalis set, which feels to me, and color-wise and thematically, that armor set is definitely sort of has a sense of royalty to it, I feel like. Royalty, but also maybe a little bit of mystery, and just overall kind of powerful, I suppose. But I felt like they worked well, so I went with that. Added some books, added some more little glowing effects with Gemspark walls behind some of the brick platforms. And then that was about it for the monument. So next up, next door to the monument, was going to be the NPC housing. And my initial thought, generally, my baseline, pre-idea imagination was that I would have a unique house, one for each NPC. Kind of like I did in Terra, only in Terra, each house was just kind of floating on its own, then mushed in, or not mushed together, but built in close proximity to each other, each individual house with no outside context. So in Tigaria here, kind of similarly, each house would be placed on its own, isolated, but to actually add just a little bit of context, I decided to give each one its own mini floating island to provide it that support and that energy to match the theme of the rest of the base. And being totally open outdoors, I had a large amount of space, and I figured I could afford it to build each house on its own little island. Now, one of the problems that I kind of ended up having was I still wound up with very compact and tight houses, because even though I built what felt like a reasonably sized floating platform for them, by the time I actually had the house on and fit on the platform, it didn't turn out very large. So a lot of the houses were pretty compact still, but overall I was happy to have them all supported with their own little island, I guess. Most importantly was the guide, as I threw up right away to start with. That's a direct copy of the masterpiece that I have in Terra, only this time it's on its own little floating island. And then I went ahead and, instead of building an island with a house every time, I figured I should just build islands, all of them, and then save the houses for later, because inventory management wise, this made a lot more sense. So obviously each of the different NPCs has their own preferred biome that they like to live in, and so I was taking that into account and trying to build different themed biome islands, floating islands for the different NPCs. And it was actually kind of funny. I basically just had the list of NPCs, so I had the full list of houses that I wanted to include, and then I went and started going off of putting them all together. I kind of wanted a roughly even spacing of different themes, so I didn't want... Well, actually, I can't remember now. I can't remember if I wanted to, not have all the desert themed islands right next to each other, but from what it looks like here, I kind of just put all the forest together and then had the desert lumped together, but I might make some adjustments later on. I can't remember. What was funny, though, is as I was finishing up the islands and the houses, I realized that I actually was incorrect about some of the NPCs' preferred biomes. So I thought that I had it generally figured out in my mind. I had an associated biome for each NPC, but it turns out that wasn't actually always the correct one. Most notably was the nurse, who I had never realized, if I remember right now, she actually prefers the hallowed biome, and I assumed that she just liked the forest forever. I don't know why I assumed that, but That's what I had thought quite firmly, and then found out later on in this process that that's not actually the case. For whatever reason, she likes the Hallow. So there were a few of those that some of them I did end up leaving, but I mostly adjusted to the right biome. Another one was the Dryad. So the Dryad loves the jungle, I think, but I had thought that it was just forest as well, so I had her on just a real little forest island, and then realized the only NPC that I had in the jungle was the witch doctor. I think I had the painter in the desert or something, and didn't realize that the painter also likes the jungle, I think. Now I'm starting to second guess all of this stuff that I'm trying to remember, but anyway, it was quite funny figuring out the different NPCs and how many things I was wrong about. Another one, though, for sure, was the tax collector. I was sure that the tax collector liked the underground, and so I built him a whole like underworld ash and hellstone themed island, and then found out that I don't think he likes that either. I think I don't know, it might be the snow or something that he likes. There's a bit of an interesting one here. I just built an upside down island base, and that was for the wizard. I thought that just to mix things up and make things exciting for the wizard, I would build him an upside down house, and figured that would be a fun thing to do. So I generally at this point have kind of the majority of the spaces organized for the houses, and I switched up into a different format where I just built all the stone together, and then I could go back and theme the biome on top of the island rather than do each one individually. So that was a little bit more efficient there, and I think I might just about have the total number of biomes, sorry, islands. The island's all ready to go. In total, I had 26 different NPC houses to include here. So then I have just the biomes to finish filling in here and there. And then maybe it was around this time that I started realizing that I was wrong about some things. I thought it was weird that there was only one jungle island, and I was like, there's got to be more NPCs that like the jungle. What am I missing? And then I found out that I was missing both, I think, the painter and the dryad in there. Had quite a few ocean homes distinguished from the desert homes, and then of course the underground as well, which I had a good time figuring out. So yeah, it looks like I have all the islands basically in place, and then I went ahead to start with the houses themselves. Looks like this is probably I want to say this is the demo man's house, but maybe not. It's definitely underground. It's got the Tinkerer's workbench in it. Oh yeah, yep, there we go. Got some explosives in, so definitely the demo man's house. down here. And generally my process was just to find a theme that would and then fit it into the space that I had available as best I could to take up as much space as I had allowed myself, and then furnish and theme it in to match the NPC. Up here I can already recognize the nurse's house, which I tried to build as a mini sort of medical facility, like a little hospital or doctor's office. So I tried to have like a little waiting room at one part, then like a bathroom or procedure room or something, and then the upstairs with medical beds and whatever. I guess another thing that I'll mention about the biomes is I was actually okay having fewer jungles than I should. Same with Hallow, because I didn't necessarily want those biomes to start overcoming the rest of the regular forest, change the background and change the music and whatnot. So I actually wanted to leave it as default forest, and so I couldn't have too much of the jungle in the vicinity, otherwise that would quickly take priority. And then on the Hallow side, I didn't want the Hallow taking over either. However, I did have a way around that where I could actually just hide in chunks of invisible, like echo-coded and actuated blocks of either crimstone or ebonstone, which would kind of counteract the hallowed block count. So I could actually have the hallowed in its fullness, and then hide it with hidden corruption and crimson blocks, basically. So I did end up doing that, I think, by the end of it. Over here, the next house was for the merchant, and so I built him a pretty humble, small stone cabin type deal. A little worn out cottage for the merchant, but I wanted it to be cozy, and then have just a couple of items themed for him, like his piggy bank and his painting there. So that worked out pretty good. Again, very compact. There's not really a whole lot to it. Up above him was time to put the dryad, so I wanted to just I guess I wasn't too creative, just a little living tree house for the dryad. Figured that she would be happy with that. But this again was before I realized that she actually liked the jungle. I feel like, though, looking like visually, the dryad fits really well in just the base forest. Like, her colors match perfectly, and then building in a little cozy living tree and having little details of plants and living wood all around really fits well for the dryad. So I don't think I changed her. I don't think I changed her biome to jungle. I think I just left it here. Then what's the next one? I want to say this could be the Tavern Keep. I think it's either the Tavern Keep or the Painter. I'm just trying to go off of memory here. Kind of another rugged looking building. with the enchanted sundial. Oh, I know who this is. So this is the zoologist, isn't it? I put the sundial, yep, and the werewolf, the charm, the moon charm in there. So yeah, that'd be for the zoologist. Just sort of a rough but cozy looking hut there in the forest. Then moved on to my first ocean theme, where I was building a little raft basically in the small pool. This is kind of another example of how small my houses ended up becoming, because I wanted that by the context and support of the biome itself to add to the NPC's house. So this was for the angler, I believe, and so I wanted him to have his own little raft on top of the ocean, or visually depict something like that. But by the time I had his island, the little ocean built, and then his raft, that only left almost the smallest amount of room possible for his actual room. So stuff like that. The visual, the biome support really cost a lot of space, I guess, in the end of it. But so next to the angler down here at the very bottom right hand corner, this was my house for the tax collector. As mentioned, completely underworld themed. I didn't realize that he doesn't actually like being in the underground or underworld, but I also didn't really care. he can go in the underworld for all I care. It also looks really cool and has just an insane amount of items with the theme to fill in with. So like, if you're building an underworld themed house or building, there is no way that you are going to build it too big to not have too big to look empty after filling it in with all the underworld furniture. So then I moved right above the tax collector's little island there, and I'm trying to remember whose this house is. Okay, I think it's the mechanic. Yep. So the mechanic does like the snow, because the cold keeps all of her mechanisms running better, and had her painting in there with a bunch of little mechanisms, logic gates, and a pump in an item frame, just to sort of showcase her theme. And then next to that was another underground theme, and to go right next to her, I didn't actually do the Tinkerer, which would have been nice to put them next to each other, but this is somebody else. And who that? Oh, it's the old man, I think. My clue is Chippy's couch being the old man's, or the clother's house. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure that the clother likes the underground. Maybe he does. The red wall with the adamantite wall definitely fits his theme very well. And then I do add his special mannequin in there, so that's got to be the clother's house. I did learn while doing this, which is part of what ended up leading me to realizing all of the incorrect biome assignments that I had in my mind. If you look at the NPCs in the bestiary, they display their favorite background or their favorite biome in the background of their bestiary picture, I believe. So I started realizing that on a lot of cases, and then had to make some adjustments there. So here would be the dye trader, or sorry, I think this is actually the painter. There in the desert with some paintings that he's working on. And I think the reason why I got confused and have always associated the painter with the desert is because I know that the painter likes the dye trader and the dye trader likes the desert. So I always have them in my worlds together in the desert, and they're both pretty happy. But I didn't actually realize that the painter actually prefers the jungle and the vibrant colors of the jungle rather than the desert. So definitely wrong about that one. But I got that house all put together there. I'm pretty sure that's the painter. And I think this one must be for the dye trader down here. Although, like I mentioned, I always have them together in the desert on my regular worlds. And so thematically they fit very close to each other. But I'll probably add some key details like the dye vat outside or something for the dye trader. Each of the little houses does have its own light switch. So there's like a ton of different little light switches if you were to want to turn all of the NPC house lights off or on. It's kind of tedious to go through every house and do that, but yeah, there we go. So I have a magic lamp, but also various dyes on shelves in his house, so that's definitely for the dye trader. This one I remember distinctly for the arms dealer. The arms dealer also does like the desert. I'm pretty sure that's correct about that one. And so out the back of his house, I had a target dummy set up for him to have some target practice and have like a mini shooting range idea on the back of his house. So that was the main distinguishing piece for the arms dealer. But there were some important things, details inside the house, like a vault and some different guns and item frames and stuff. But it took me a minute to find a decent little combination of walls and blocks that sort of fit the arms dealer thematically, I felt like. But eventually got something figured out to match his general aesthetic. Yeah, and the ammo box is also a pretty telltale furniture item that only fits with the arms dealer. I guess I would kind of call it a Wild West sort of desert outback theme for the arms dealer there. And then we have another little ocean biome right above. The ocean is again sort of notorious for leaving only a very small amount of room for the NPC's house itself. And this island was for the what's it called? The stylist. The stylist, of course, prefers the ocean, and so I built a little hairdressing room shop themed for her to reside in. Tried to provide as much detail and color as I could in the little ocean and surrounding sand that I could on the stylus island there. So I filled in the water with seashells and starfish and coral. But again, the actual house is pretty small. Then I get to one of the first top level houses, so the islands where nothing is above them. And so these ones, by this time I started realizing how small I was making the islands and wanted to give some more space. So I sort of expanded them generally, but also these ones on top didn't have any upper build limit. So I had a lot more flexibility and size room to take advantage of on these houses. So here for the steampunk house, for the steampunker, I had the space and went for a cool idea where I could have it on walking legs, built out of cogs, so they have little bits of mechanical aspects, and have like a desert walker house on legs for the steampunker here. So this is kind of my first of the top houses where I was actually able to bring in a lot more detail and creativity into the house design itself, rather than, fill it in with as much environmental details as I could, but was left with minimal space to actually work with for the house itself. Whereas in these cases, I had just a little bit more freedom and took advantage of that with a little bit more space. Still, I mean, relatively compact and completely filled to the brim with furniture and details. So it's definitely still just as busy as any of the smaller houses, but it's got a little bit more structure to it. But definitely worked out pretty good. What the steampunker's house is probably one of my favorites of all of them here. I like how it turned out. Had just some goblins pass by the world as well. And then next to the steampunker was going to be the pirate. So on this ocean themed environment, I actually had just a barely big enough water pool to actually build a little ship in. And so that was my goal for the pirate captain, to have him on his own little pirate ship. So I went with basically the most compact but still housing suitable pirate ship that I could come up with, and barely managed to get it to fit in okay, but it's definitely cramped, and the proportions are a bit skewed for sure, but the pirate does have his own little ship, I guess. It's funny that probably the pirate ship in Circa Terra is probably bigger than this one, but it doesn't have the context of the little ocean island supporting it, so it doesn't have that going for it. Just finishing up all the details with shells and starfish and rubble, and then that was basically it for the little ship here. Then jumped on to the next one. This one is the Goblin Tinkerer, I believe. So again, on here I ended up with more space vertically than some of the other islands had. So I took advantage of that and made a unique double story shape for the house. And then the Tinkerer is kind of interesting because he has a unique vibe and stuff that he holds, but it doesn't particularly match any given biome or theme furniture-wise, I feel like. So I kind of did a little bit of a mix of some shade wood, ebon wood, and then underground atmosphere. But I used just the regular unpainted crimstone bricks for his little floors. And then for his roof, I believe that's just tungsten bricks. So I tried to mismatch and put together various blocks and furniture that I felt the Tinkerer matched, and it did work out okay. I do like the little Tinkerer's house quite a bit there, and he does have his workshop there, his work in the bottom floor. So should be able to keep working on his little accessory combos and all that, getting his reforging done. Next to the Tinkerer, in between him and the arms dealer, is the Golfer. Again, just another little forest theme here. And the Golfer, I just wanted him one little driving range, or whatever you call it, like out the back of his house. There's one little hole he could golf for. So that's how you know it's him. Other than that, just some random supporting furniture in his little sort of postmodern single slope roof house design. And then up on the top left corner of the whole NPC housing, we have one unique biome that only one NPC has, which is the truffle in the glowing mushroom biome. So generally speaking, I just went for a larger, uniquely shaped glowing mushroom and tried to build him a house in it. Also, I need to go let this cat out because he's going crazy outside my door. Okay, I made it back. Should be better now. Looks like we must be finished with the truffles mushroom there, and onto what I think this may be the cyborg's house down here. Maybe. Then another snow-themed building that I sort of jumped onto the structure for before finishing the furnishing of the other one. This one's for Santa, just seasonally when he needs to drop by. But I think that other one is for the cyborg, who also, interestingly, kind of likes the snow. Pretty sure that's right. And then obviously Santa does, so he has his little Santa themed cabin there, I guess. Oh yeah, so I guess I actually go for the 2-for-1 here. So both I'm furnishing both Santa's cabin and the cyborg's house as well. So Cyborg clearly needed the granite furniture theme. I feel like that really fits him and his aesthetic pretty well. And then Santa had the boreal theme and some of the furniture and various items to go along with that. I felt like the Tinkerer's Workshop would also work well in Santa's house to give him a little workstation to play on, build little things. Next was finally the one jungle house, it looks like. So for the witch doctor, just grab some rich mahogany and some bamboo, some mud bricks, and also hay bales to figure out what I kind of felt like would be the better roof option, and threw together a nice little wetland jungle mud themed house for the witch doctor there. Just a nice cozy jungle theme, I guess. It's kind of, I feel like he's the jungle variant of the zoologist's house that I built in the forest, with just sort of a very natural feel to it. Lots of plants and jungle leaves and flowers to provide context for. Then we've got Hallow themed, and this is actually for the tavern keep. It's the little bar that I put in for the tavern keep. I didn't really realize this, but kind of makes sense that the tavern keep likes the Hallow, so he got his own little bar tavern in the hallowed biome. He's got quite a few larger furniture items that I felt like worked really well, like the what's it called, the trophies from the Old One's army bosses, obviously. So the ogre is like the classic tavern keep furniture item, I feel like. But somewhat similarly, I felt like the deer clops trophy with the big antler kind of fit pretty well in the pub. So I got that as well. And both of those, importantly, I did put in item frames rather than hanging directly on the wall, so that I could make them much more compact. Because unfortunately, as I've talked about, the actual house and the room for furniture inside the housing was very small. So, not a lot there. Then another little Hallow themed house, and I think this is probably for the party girl. Yeah. Another fairly modest sized house, but party girl themed. The shape I went for was just kind of a pointy, like party hat design, I guess, and nothing too special. Just felt like that was a shape that I hadn't used in any of the other houses yet, so I went for it and just put a couple little party themed furniture things around and called it pretty good. Up in the very top here, I think at this point there were only 2 remaining houses to be done. One for the princess, which is this one here, and then lastly the wizard, which is the upside down one. The princess I wanted to make sort of a royal looking little, like maybe a little castle, but more like just a ballroom, kind of like I had in my main 1.4 playthrough world. I built a custom hallowed biome underground in this big sort of geode enclosure, and I had this cool ballroom with marble and pearlstone bricks, and so I went with a similar idea for this one here for the princess. Just kind of wanted to make a royal dance hall or something. At this point too, in my notes, I have that I had hit right at 1,300 hours since creating this world of Tigaria. So at this point, we are 13 hours or 1,300 hours into the progress on this world in its entirety. So that's kind of a good idea of the timeline, I guess, generally. But to finish off the NPC housing, the last house necessary was for the wizard. And so a similar theme to I had in Circa Terra. I really liked the smooth granite with the iridescent bricks. I felt like that combo went really nice together and fit the wizard well. So I went with another wizard castle built out of those the blocks. Only this time was I wanted to try to do it upside down. And it ended up working okay, but my the greatest challenge definitely was the furnishing of the house, because building furniture upside down is kind of tricky. It would be cool if you could actually turn things upside down, but it's pretty hard. So I ended up with basically being able to make a functional, suitable house technically, but making it look like it's still kind of upside down was definitely a fun challenge. But overall, the block theme worked out quite nice. And then to add little accents here and there, I did have some of the palladium columns, which I just painted gray, and also cobalt bricks to highlight little parts of blue in the roof and stuff. Those added another little layer of color to the actual structure itself. And then inside was mostly just granite furniture and the wizard's crystal ball. We got one of the gloom statues hidden in here, and a painting or two to fit. So I also had to remember that I needed navigable access for unaccessorized players or characters. So I added in a few little platforms to jump on, getting around into the wizard's castle. Then, similarly to that though, I needed to somehow connect all of the islands together so that they could be explorable via on foot. And so I had that to do. Also had the teleporter to include, and then I just ended up connecting all of the islands with these little platforms, I think. Actually, no. Oh, so I was going to do little staircase platforms that just linked all of them together, but it looked kind of weird. I didn't like the visually having that staircase all the way around there. So instead, I just placed these little floating platforms to allow the player to jump on and up and around to explore the different islands. And that way, the islands aren't actually tied to each other and looking weird in that sense, but there are these other floating furniture platform things that sort of, they add a little bit of detail, but also provide that the ability to jump around and explore even without accessories. So that's what I ended up going with for the navigation assist, to make sure that all of the platforms were walkable. Label the little NPC area. Add a few different signs here and there that I needed for explanations of various sections. And I think I'm pretty close to coming up with moving on to the next section. I really tried to add a little detail spike on top of the wizard tower, or at the bottom of the wizard tower since it's upside down. So I spent a little bit finding a block that would work for that. But then it was time to move on to the next portion, which right next door to the NPCs was the plant display. So I had the general idea that I wanted a large open greenhouse-like structure that I could then host, grow, and display all of the different plants. Was the general idea. So kind of similarly to how I initially went about outlining the furniture display on the left, I just got going on basically sketching out the outline for a large structure that I felt like should have enough space for everything that I wanted to include. And the shape of this structure took me a while to find. It took me quite a while. I wanted a greenhouse vibe, so I wanted a lot of big windows, glass walls, open areas, but still kind of enclosed in its own environment. So it took me a while to figure out how to make like big windows that were shaped properly, and the actual curvature and structure for the walls, the main supporting walls, was tough to figure out for sure. Again, it's finding that balance between large enough and strong enough structure that still has character and isn't too linear, and allows for flexibility in asymmetry and detail, I guess. So that's always the first struggle is to find that zone in a new structure. And I was able to finally come up with the outline roughly, and started just going off of that, figuring out the little roof sections, how they would differ from wall sections, what different curves and shapes and lines I wanted to implement, and just went from there. Borrowed some of the themes and shapes, obviously, from some of my other already completed smaller buildings. So I went with the gold with platinum brick domed roofs for some of the caps, I guess, matched from the welcome center in the very start of Tigaria there. And kind of had to start thinking about how I was going to actually separate the inside into different sections and have enough space for the various things. Because I had to remember that this was going to include all of the different trees, and the trees take up quite a bit of space to allow them room to grow. So I knew that just based on the trees alone, I was going to require a lot of different space. I wanted more than simply one of each different tree. I wanted a small sample instead. So first then I started measuring out and testing the height requirement on trees, which this is all of course listed on the wiki, but I needed to do a little bit of preliminary testing to figure out exactly what measurement that was, if it was like block empty space or block to block, or what it was. And of course different trees have different height requirements, so I was measuring and testing all of that, and then using that to organize a specific order in which I could place the trees. I get to the top and realize that I don't actually have enough room in this whole structure to have one layer per tree. So instead, I realized I could double up and split each layer into 2 different tree types, and that would probably work okay. I did have fewer of each tree, but I still had enough for 3 or 4 of each tree to be displayed, rather than just a single one. So I was still okay with that, and got going on getting those grown and in place, because these were basically the main, the trees being the main focus of the whole plant display, and the core which I was going to have to build everything else around. So had to get that established first. My name that I came up with for this plant display was the Arboretorium, which was kind of a mix between Arboretum and I guess whatever else I was trying to mix with it. There's like a greenhouse and the Arboretum, like a auditorium or something like that, with just a big open building. But in this case, specifically for trees and plants, so it's basically like an indoor arboretum. I called the Arboretorium, and hopefully that, I guess, intuitively sounds like a decent name when it's heard. So what? I think I may have forgotten about the mushroom, like the tall mushrooms, and then realized I wanted to get those added in as well, down in the bottom there. But here, like, basically we're coming up on the actual interesting part of the plant display, which is growing all of the non-placeable and manipulatable plants. So things like naturally grown mushrooms, cactus, like cacti, and various special oasis plants and cacti, as well as, importantly, Abigail's flower, which technically is kind of is a plant furniture. So I went around, roughly figured out the spacing that I wanted for each of the different sections of themed plants, and then I had to start growing the ones that needed to naturally grow. So cacti, cattails, lily pads, Abigail's flower, which I did finally eventually get, and then oh yeah, that was the other thing. So in the very bottom, I included the tall mushrooms with the bamboo next to it, which bamboo is kind of a weird one because it's technically like almost like a tree in most senses, but it's not really a tree, especially because it's broken with a pickaxe rather than an axe. So it's definitely a weird one, but I felt like it went closer to trees than anywhere else, along with the big mushrooms. So I got those both down there. However, in addition to all of the mentioned cattails and lily pads and that type of stuff, oasis plants, those basically all have hallowed, crimson, and corruption variants. So I had to be mindful of that. Another thing to mention there would be the mushrooms. You have the regular mushrooms, but then you also have vile mushrooms and vicious mushrooms, which are unique. There is no hallowed variation of the mushroom. It's just the regular mushroom that grows in the hallow, so I didn't have that to try to implement. And then there's everything down to the grass texture and the vines as well that I wanted to have on display. So basically a lot of growing and figuring out. And this was where I discovered a little bit of interesting knowledge that I'll have to remember exactly. Maybe I have it written down here. But in regards to like cattails and lily pads, let's see. I'm still not seeing it. There was something though where there were in the Hallow you can get lily pads, but you can't actually get cattails. But in the Crimson and the Corruption, you can get cattails, but not lily pads, or something weird like that. So it is kind of funny. Oh, and then, so there's also all of the Rubble Maker furniture. So this was kind of a weird thing. I didn't realize this initially, but I ended up realizing it and wanting to fit it in here because it doesn't really go in the main furniture display. The Rubble Maker is largely more natural based furniture. So I decided to go ahead and make space for all of the Rubble Maker furniture here in the Arboretorium, which does thematically fit quite nicely, but it did take up a lot of space, and I was barely able to actually fit it in by the time I had all the other plants and everything fit in here that I wanted. Another funny thing that I think I mentioned in earlier in the other episode was that I forgot about the large potted plants. All of the potted plants that you buy from the Dryad. Wow, just forgot the Dryad's name. The potted plants bought from the Dryad, as well as like the Princess with the crystal potted plants, and then you also have a lot of large underworld themed potted plants from obsidian crates and stuff. So those all needed to be added, and I had planned on doing them either in the furniture display or the plant display, but forgot about them in both cases, and then realized later and had to build them their own small array, which I ended up fitting in no problem at the end of connecting everything structurally. But as I was talking about, I don't see my notes on the special lily pads or cattail discovery that I ended up making. Another important thing, plant-wise, would be the fallen logs, like the fairy logs that generate naturally on the surface of the world. I guess they would go kind of similarly in category to demon altars and crimson altars, which now that I think about it, I have that one demon altar in my special crafting zone, but there's definitely no crimson altars on this world, so that's something that I guess is impossible to include, and I hadn't really thought about that until now. The crimson altars and crimson hearts and shadow orbs, those things kind of are not easy to get. In fact, they're impossible. But the fairy logs are, I did realize that I wanted to include. However, they're only naturally generated, and there weren't any naturally placed logs within any sort of the vicinity of this area. Although, if I was a true gamer, I probably would have somehow built the arboretorium around an existing fairy log, and so I could have that actually on display in here. Instead, I did have logs outside of Tigaria to the right, and so I ended up just building a little teleporter and having access to a little viewing area for those logs that you're taken to from the arboretorium here. So I did remember the fairy logs, and I wanted to have them, but unfortunately the best I could do was just teleport you to go take a look at them from their originally generated location. Another thing that I haven't mentioned, but you can obviously see I've already built in, was the various types of moss. So I had all of the moss displayed on its little stone there. I guess technically I could put moss on stone as well as gray bricks, and it would look slightly different, but I just did it on stone. It doesn't change the little moss tufts that sprout off of it, I'm pretty sure, so yeah, I wasn't too worried. I had to figure out the base underlying foundation structure, I guess, for the arboretorium. Basically, I had a substantial brick slab going across the entire base to support the structure, and then under that I went with those various large pillar supports, the feet that penetrate into the dirt to actually hold up the building. And I also did some background variants where I alternated the foreground and background supports to give it a little bit more depth. And then at this point, I had most all, if not all, of the actual plants kind of figured out. Well, definitely not all, but most of the plants were kind of figured out at this point, and it was a good time to go back to the main structural support pillars in the interior and get those detailed. So I came up with a detailed addition scheme to paint them over with, using obsidian and some palladium columns, which are quite useful in different pillars and commons columns. A lot of the adamantite beams as well to add a little bit of detail, and then just texturing the rest of the remaining bricks with the standard pearlstone, ebonstone, crimstone brick combo. And then all of these pillars, of course, were going to be actuated so that they are passable in the foreground. You can walk by, no problem. And then the color would also shift to be kind of gray, so that would visually put them further back in the depth, which is what I wanted there. So they still provide that detail and that texture and that structural support visually, but they're actually able to be navigated around. So the building was still explorable in that, which is my main goal, obviously. Then for the very floors, I thought that I could clean them up a little bit and add just a level of a layer of smooth marble to add a little bit of smoothness, and instead of just the bricks the whole way. So got that thrown in, and then a little bit more detail here in the pillars, But I was getting pretty close to being at the point of wall filling, I think. And I'm trying to remember now. I think basically to fit the theme of the arboretorium, I used a lot of big glass windows and glass sections in the background wall, and then otherwise just filled in enough out of brick and support things to structurally make sense and hold everything together. Went around the outside to smooth out the windows, add supports for balcony sections, touch up the actual wall texture, and add in the palladium pillars and stuff like that. Add little platform details so that I could hang banners off of it as well. I think I hung banners off of most of the outside to add that another level of texture and visual motion, I guess. And of course, the regular green banners worked nicely for the plant theme, plant display. And then some more general furnishing for the rest of the remaining platforms. But it was also time, as I was talking about, to figure out the walls. So now using walls and glass, I was able to basically start figuring out what sections were just going to be bricks and what sections were glass, and then what sections might I use just like bits of glass or bits of different bricks to highlight and display different areas. So it was time to start walling it off. So generally a lot of big glass, and then I guess some just larger brick sections in the walls, kind of between the main support pillars that go up on the outside here. So that would provide enough structure to support everything. But then the rest of it, including the entire center column behind the trees, was glass, so that it lit up and allowed for that space and that air to, well, not air, but sunlight to shine through for all of the trees and that. And then I did go back and add windows in behind all of the different plants, basically, and then various little windows on the staircases and in the other rooms, because I needed to bring that light back in, the sunlight to fully light everything up again now that I had darkened places here and there. Did a little bit of shifting here still on some of the water tanks for the cattails, basically, and lily pads. And I think I still have a couple of areas available here, like on the left-hand side there, for different things, and I can't remember what I end up using those for, but I'm pretty sure I filled them in with something. kind of similarly to what I tried to accomplish in the very top of the furniture display. I had this extra little room or space amount up here and wanted to build in some extra details. So I got out my hammer and some bricks, and then another additional emerald gemspark crystal, and added in a little detailed band, kind of like a crown or something, or tiara or royalty headpiece that I fit here on the top of the arboretorium, and that ended up adding in a little more in terms of detail and design. So that was nice to have. And then figured out some little fancier chandeliers to install, and a lot more interior lighting and furnishing to do, of course, as well. Still trying to get some more like mushroom cattails to grow. I just had the hardest time getting those things to grow. But I had only a couple of them, which I guess was enough to display, but still not a lot. Adding in yet more windows because I really wanted that light to be allowed through. And then a lot of wall use to sort of connect all the different various platforms and add a structure internally so that everything had its own connection and felt a lot more supported. So that worked out definitely better as I got that all backed up, I guess. Shells and starfish, of course, all around in here. Oh, okay, so in these sections I got out a bunch of item frames and then filled in various plants and seeds and different plant and seed items themselves. Oh, and then I also had, I guess, all the different regular plant colors from the dryad, and so I got, or not plant colors but flower colors. You have the special flower seeds, and so I got a little planter box garden for each of the different colored seeds to show off the different colors of flowers that you can plant together. And then at that point, that's mostly the finishing touches on the actual displays inside, I think. Still have a lot of furnishing to do, and I'm still trying to add in more and more lighting because at nighttime it was still pretty dark in places. But I was working on that. Then got a couple of teleporters set up here. So one of which, I think the one on the left, is the one that you arrive at when going from the main hub in the core. And then the right-hand teleporter, I believe, just takes you out to those fairy logs that I was talking about outside. I'm gonna add in the little welcome sign, figure out a good way to attach that thematically and structurally, and then a lot of furnishing gets underway. I ended up deciding to add in a couple little patches of grass into the floor to bring out the living theme of the build a little bit more, and then to further augment that, I actually end up making two big additions surrounding the building where I build a little bit larger platforms for each of the different tree variants on the sort of arrayed around the outside of the upper half of the building, and then supporting those platforms and also encompassing and growing over the rest of the arboretorium, I built large living vines and trees that twist around. And I found that those finally really actually was the key to kind of bringing that feeling of growth into the arboretorium, because up to this point it still felt kind of um, kind of empty in a weird way. Um, it was missing the feeling of energy and growth and green. So I was able to add in larger vine structures around the outside eventually, which helped with that. Also got a couple of nice little fountains built in outside, which worked pretty good with using statues, a marble bathtub, and then some different platforms. I think those are mainly, I just used those green dungeon platforms with the little loop texture on the bottom. Worked well for what I was trying to do. But then, yep, interior was just a lot of furniture filled in using either marble or living furniture, depending on which sort of floor section I was matching. But once I finished the outside tree platforms, as well as the living trees vines that wrap around the whole thing, then the arboretorium was pretty much done, and it was feeling a little bit more whole. Also have to do the lights. Can't forget about that. But as far as commentary goes here, I think that's generally the process and the idea laid out there. There's just about 10 minutes, 11 minutes more if my recordings line up here, of the building of the outside structure here. And I'll just let you guys enjoy that and listen to the tunes. And I'll catch you in the final episode of the time lapse coming up next. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an outstanding rest of your day, and hope you enjoy the last few minutes of the build here.